A man sits alone at dawn. The city is still asleep. The lights flicker off in distant windows. Steam rises from a forgotten cup of coffee. He's not sad, not angry, just blank. He has everything: a job, a partner, plans. But something inside him feels weightless, like the center of his life has quietly gone missing. He stares out the window, and a question, ancient, heavy, dangerous, rises uninvited. Why am I alive? It doesn't come as despair, it comes as stillness, as truth. We rarely speak this question aloud, not because we don't feel it, but because we're terrified of where it might lead. What is the meaning of life? Not as a slogan, not as a meme, not as a Pinterest quote on purpose or passion, but really, what are we doing here? Why get out of bed? Why keep trying? Why love, suffer, build, lose, and try again? We live in a world that offers 1,000 answers, but no direction. Find your passion, chase your dream, manifest your truth. But what if you've done all that, and the ache is still there? What if life doesn't offer meaning, and you're left to invent it alone, or worse? What if there is meaning, but it requires a leap you don't know how to make? This is where two of the most powerful minds in history meet and violently disagree: Jean-Paul Sartre and Søren Kierkegaard. Two men, both obsessed with the same question, but offering radically different answers. Sartre stood in the ruins of religion and said, "There is no God, no design, no plan. We are condemned to be free." Meaning for him was not given, it had to be created by you. Through your choices, through your courage to face the void. To live authentically was to become your own God and bear the weight of that freedom. Kierkegaard, on the other hand, looked into the same void, whined, and jumped. He said, "Reason will never take you to meaning. Faith is not knowing, it's trusting." For him, despair wasn't caused by emptiness. It was caused by separation from the divine, from truth, from the self you were meant to become. To be whole was not to create meaning, but to surrender to it. So here's the question: are we here to choose meaning or to find it? Is life a canvas or a calling? Do we invent ourselves or discover what's already been written in our depths? This isn't just theory. This is your life. Every choice, every regret, every quiet moment staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. This is the human dilemma: to live as if meaning depends on us, or to live as if meaning is already waiting. If only we dare to leap. Here's the tension. We are born into a world that doesn't give us clear answers, only endless expectations. We are told to succeed, to become someone, to find happiness. But no one tells us why. Why become? Why achieve? Why keep going? And beneath that silence grows a crisis. A meaning crisis. Not because we can't find success, but because success on its own doesn't feel like enough. So we look to philosophy, to the thinkers who didn't avoid the question, but ran straight into it, and two of the boldest, two of the loudest, loneliest voices in the void, Jean-Paul Sartre and Søren Kierkegaard. Both lived in radically different times. Kierkegaard, the 19th century Dane, writing in a world still shaped by Christianity, yet deeply aware of its spiritual emptiness. Sartre, the 20th century French rebel, writing after world wars when God had been declared dead and the only thing left was freedom. But both agreed on one thing: the question of meaning isn't academic, it's existential. It affects everything: how we love, how we work, how we suffer, how we live, and how we die. For Sartre, life has no built-in purpose. There is no divine blueprint, no cosmic instruction manual. You exist first, then you define your essence. Freedom isn't optional, it's your sentence. You must choose, you must act, and you must take full responsibility for those choices. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. In this worldview, meaning is not discovered. It's forged, moment by moment, through courage, authenticity, and responsibility. Kierkegaard, on the other hand, saw things differently. To him, we are not blank slates. We are souls, longing to become whole, and despair arises when we live disconnected from that truth, when we bury our eternal self in distractions, roles, and rationality. His answer? Not logic, not freedom, but faith. A leap, not into certainty, but into the absurd. Into God, into the paradox that truth is not something we prove, but something we become through subjective commitment. So here we are, two giants, two paths. Sartre, create your meaning through radical freedom. Kierkegaard, find your meaning through radical surrender. And both speak to the modern soul, caught between the desire to define itself and the longing to be found. To understand the depth of this divide and the strange harmony between them, we need to step into their lives, their pain and their philosophies, and fully. Let's begin with Jean-Paul Sartre, the philosopher of freedom, anguish, and authenticity. Born in a godless century, Sartre didn't mourn the absence of divine purpose. He saw it as a challenge. If there is no God, then life has no pre-written meaning, and that means everything is up to you. Sartre, condemned to be free, his most famous line, "Existence precedes essence." It means we aren't born with a fixed identity. We exist first, then define ourselves through action. There's no cosmic job title, no sacred role. You don't discover your meaning. You create it. But here's the catch. This total freedom is also a burden. Sartre wrote, "Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. There's no one to blame, no divine fallback, no fate, only you and the choices you make. Bad faith and the lie of the role." But most people, Sartre argued, run from this freedom. They pretend they have no choice. They hide behind roles, systems, and social expectations. They say, "I'm just doing my job. I had no other option. This is what society expects." Sartre called this bad faith, the act of lying to yourself to escape your responsibility. To live authentically is to stop running, to face the void, to choose your values, and to act as if your choices define the meaning of life, because they do. Now enter Søren Kierkegaard, the melancholy Danish prophet of paradox and inward truth. He wasn't interested in abstract freedom. He was obsessed with something more intimate, the self, and what happens when it loses its grounding. Kierkegaard. Despair and the leap of faith. Kierkegaard believed that despair is not sadness. It's the sickness of not being yourself. The greatest hazard of all, losing one's self, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. Despair, he said, comes in many forms. Living through others, avoiding your deepest truths, refusing to relate to the eternal. Within you, and the only way out, not knowledge, not performance, but faith. The leap into the absurd. Kierkegaard said that the most important truths can't be proven, they must be lived. He called it the leap of faith. It's not irrational, it's beyond reason. A leap into God, into love, into meaning. That logic cannot hold. To become a self, Kierkegaard argued, you must relate your finite life to something infinite, not to a system, but to a relationship with the divine, with your deepest truth, with the self that wants to be realized. Sartre versus Kierkegaard. Two roads, same abyss. Sartre says, you're alone, be bold, make your own meaning. Kierkegaard says, you're never alone. But meaning will cost you your pride, your certainty, your ego. One is a rebel, the other, a mystic. But both agree. Meaning is not automatic. It's not given, it's not easy, and it's not cheap. It demands awakening, courage, confrontation. So who's right? That depends on what kind of truth you're ready to face. Are you willing to carry the weight of total freedom? Sartre, or to Surrender to a meaning you can never fully prove, only feel. Kierkegaard. Maybe both are necessary, because maybe real meaning isn't found in choosing sides, but in facing the tension between them. But these weren't just abstract ideas. They shaped history, they shaped minds, and today they're shaping your life, whether you know it or not. We don't live in ancient Greece. We're not monks in caves. We're not 19th century Danish philosophers writing by candlelight. We live here, in a world of phones, deadlines, notifications, and quiet existential exhaustion. So what does Sartre versus Kierkegaard have to do with us? Everything. Because the modern world is the battleground between their ideas. Sartre's world, freedom without anchor. Walk into a bookstore, scroll through Instagram, watch a TED Talk. What do you see? Design your life. Create your own. Reality. You are the author of your story. This is Sartre's shadow in modern life, the gospel of freedom. We are told, there is no objective truth, only perspective. There is no fixed path, only what you make of it. Meaning, make your own. And in some ways, this is liberating. You don't need permission to matter. You don't need a priest or a tradition. You can choose your values, your identity, your purpose. But with that freedom comes pressure. The pressure to always choose right, the fear of wasting time, the anxiety of building a life from scratch, with no blueprint, the burnout of infinite choice. This is the paradox of modernity. We're more free than ever, and more lost than ever. We can become anything, and many of us don't know who we are. We can have endless options and feel paralyzed by all of them. This is Sartre's warning. Freedom, without inner grounding, becomes a kind of curse. We build ourselves like brands, curate identities, perform, purpose, but it's never quite enough because deep down we're asking, but is this real? Is this me? Kierkegaard's echo, the quiet return of faith, and in that silence, something else is returning, not religion necessarily, but longing spirituality, stillness, a hunger for something deeper than choice, something you don't create, but receive. More and more people are turning toward mindfulness, mysticism, meaningful rituals, sacred texts, the inner life. They're not seeking more productivity. They're seeking presence, not performance, but connection to something larger, older, truer. This is Kierkegaard's influence, rising from the ashes of burnout. The real-world personas. We inhabit, you've seen this play out. The overachiever who has it all but feels numb. The artist who can't create because they don't know why anymore. The activist who burns out because the world's pain doesn't feel redeemable. The therapist who helps others but has never felt deeply seen themselves. These are modern Kierkegaardian figures, souls in despair not because they failed but because they succeeded without a center. They live with a fractured self. A life curated, but not committed. A crisis we don't name. The truth is, most people you know are experiencing a low-level Kierkegaardian crisis and Sartrean anxiety. At the same time, we don't want to be told who we are, but we're afraid we might never figure it out on our own. We want total freedom, but we long to surrender to something meaningful, something bigger. We crave authenticity, but we fear being wrong. And in that paradox, we stall, we drift, we distract. So what happens next? How does the mind, our inner compass, respond to this pressure? How do we psychologically carry the burden of inventing meaning or the terror of surrendering to it? The mind is not built for endless freedom, nor is it built for blind faith. It is built to seek coherence, to find meaning in chaos, to form identity from fragments, to make life feel livable. But when that coherence collapses, something breaks. The anxiety of Sartre's freedom. If Sartre was right, and we are condemned to be free, then your life is entirely your own construction. You must choose your values. You must define your purpose. You must justify your existence every day. And while this can be empowering, it often becomes paralyzing. Because what if you choose wrong? What if your purpose changes? What if you build a life and then it still feels hollow? This is existential anxiety, a psychological state where every moment carries the weight of defining your entire self. The mask of meaning. The mind, overwhelmed by this pressure, looks for shortcuts. So it clings to identities, career, relationship, status, beliefs, online persona. These become masks, not because they're fake, but because they only show a piece of the truth. The more we cling to the mask, the more we fear losing it, and so we perform. We become that person, until one day we can't remember what's underneath. Sartre called this bad faith. Psychology calls it self-alienation. Kierkegaard's despair. When the self forgets itself. Kierkegaard believed that the deepest psychological wound is not fear or failure, but despair. Not dramatic sobbing in the street despair, but the quiet daily kind, the kind that says, I'm doing everything right, but something in me is missing. This, Kierkegaard argued, happens when you live disconnected from your eternal self, the self that longs for truth, purpose, and God. Despair arises when we substitute that self with surface versions, the successful self, the nice self, the liked self, all while something deeper whispers, this isn't it. Jung, bridging the gap. Carl Jung offers a bridge between Sartre's freedom and Kierkegaard's faith. He believed the psyche has a built-in drive toward wholeness, a process he called individuation. It's the journey of integrating the shadow-breaking false personas, listening to dreams, symbols, instincts, reconnecting with the deeper self. Jung didn't say you must invent meaning, nor that you must blindly submit to it. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This psychologically is self-realization, and it requires both Sartre's courage and Kierkegaard's surrender, the split within. Here's the paradox. Too much freedom, anxiety, fragmentation, loss of direction, too much certainty, rigidity, dogma, loss of authenticity. The psyche craves a center, but in modern life that center is gone, or outsourced, so the mind spirals. Some cope by numbing, some by achieving, some by distracting, some by retreating. But none of these answer the original question, who am I and why am I here? The only way through? Face the question, not solve it, not silence it, but live it. As Kierkegaard said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. So how is this tension echoing now, in our culture, our relationships, our obsessions, our disconnection? Let's look at the world around us and see how it's shaped by a war of meaning we never stopped fighting. We scroll, we post, we strive, but beneath the surface, something's cracking. The question isn't whether people are suffering, it's why that suffering feels so hollow, so untethered, so silent. We're not just depressed, we're disoriented, not just anxious, but spiritually unmoored. And this is where Sartre and Kierkegaard rise again, not as ancient philosophers, but as invisible architects of the modern condition. Sartre's freedom in a hyper-performative age, everywhere we turn. We're told, you can be anything, do anything, reinvent yourself at any time. TikTok life advice. Glow-up culture. Endless personal branding. This is freedom, to the extreme. But with it comes the pressure to constantly perform meaning, curate your purpose, monetize your passion, justify your identity, again and again. This is Sartre's world. You are the sole author of your essence. And if life feels empty, that's on you. The burnout of self-creation. So we build, we strive, we hustle for worth. But eventually, the truth leaks through. You can't build meaning faster than you lose yourself. We feel it in career fatigue, online fatigue, identity fatigue. The deeper cost of infinite freedom is the exhaustion of constant becoming. And this is where Kierkegaard's whisper returns. Soft, but piercing. The quiet return. To Kierkegaard, amid the noise, more people are turning back, not to dogma, but to something deeper. Meditation, pilgrimage, stillness, art, prayer, even if unnamed. We are slowly rediscovering what Kierkegaard always knew. That meaning cannot be proven. It must be lived. That faith is not belief without evidence. It's trust despite absence. That the self isn't made by force, but revealed through surrender. In this moment of cultural burnout, Kierkegaard's absurd leap feels strangely comforting, because maybe we're tired of proving. Maybe we're ready to receive. The generation in the middle, this is the Kierkegaard-Sartre generation, split between the hunger to define ourselves and the longing to be found. We want to rebel, and we want to be held. We want truth, but we want it on our terms. We crave meaning, but only if we don't have to bow to it. This is the modern human dilemma, and it's not a failure. It's the evolution of an old spiritual tension, one we've inherited, rebranded, and now must face again. So what do we do now? Do we leap like Kierkegaard, or build like Sartre? Or is there something deeper, some hidden synthesis waiting in the stillness? A man stands once more at the window, but this time, something's different. The silence still lingers. The world still offers no final answer, but he's no longer afraid of that silence. He doesn't need to fill it, or flee from it, because he now understands. Life may never tell you why you're here, but that doesn't mean you're lost. Jean-Paul Sartre would tell him, there is no script. You must choose. You must create. And he's right. There is power in ownership, in defining your values, in building your meaning. But Søren Kierkegaard would whisper, no meaning you invent will satisfy the soul until you remember what it already knows. And he's right too. There is freedom in surrender. There is wisdom in stillness. There is something sacred in the leap. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question. Not, what is the meaning of life? But, how am I living in relation to the mystery? Am I hiding from freedom, or using it to remember who I am? Am I building a life or becoming a self? Meaning, it turns out, is not a one-time answer. It's a dialogue, a tension, a paradox you return to again and again in the quiet spaces between moments. So what now? You don't have to choose a side. You don't have to be the architect or the believer, the creator or the leaper. You just have to listen, honestly, humbly, to the question pulsing beneath your routines. Is this true for me? And if not, you begin again, because maybe the meaning of life isn't a final destination. Maybe it's not something we find or make or prove. Maybe it's what happens when we stop pretending and start living like our lives matter, because they do, even in the silence, even in the absence, even in the not knowing.